hard enough figuring out what technology will make your organization more efficient, much less finding the right person to run it. This is particularly important when selling digitally, when often you never meet the person you're attempting to sell face to face with. But let's have ourselves a pocket sized pep talk because you won't make the sale without building a relationship with the prospect. And to do that, you have to have the right technology and tools. And you're about to hear from a pro who's here to tell you how.
A Pocket Sized Pep Talk, the podcast that can help energize your business and your life with a quick, inspiring message. Now, here's your host, Rob Jollis.
Today's guest, Christopher Antonopoulos, is the founder of Measured Results, a company that helps organizations build out the right combination of technology and process to drive revenue. His philosophy of no lead left behind means that all leads should have a status and a disposition of where they are in the sales process. A point, by the way, I wholeheartedly agree with. Happy to have you with us, and welcome to the show, Christopher.
Yeah, thanks for having me today. It's pretty exciting to be on your show, and hopefully we can provide lots of value to those that are listening in.
I am confident we will because you had me I'm a real process guy. So I'm a former Xerox guy. So we did everything with a process. So that's one of the things I'm kind of looking forward to getting into with you. And I want to start with a quote of yours. Now, don't get nervous, but and tell me if I got this right. With the right technology and process, you can sell as effectively digitally as in person. You stand by that quote?
I do. I think in some cases you can do a better job of it. I have in the last 4 years, I can count on one hand the deals that we've done where we've actually met the client before they've signed on the dotted line. So yeah, I wholeheartedly believe in that statement and hopefully talk a bit more about sort of how you do that.
Yeah. And I don't think it's a trap question either. It just got me thinking because first blush, and look, I'm a writer and I like to catch people's attention. That one caught my attention. But, when I sat down and thought about it, I thought how many times I'm actually pushing people to Zoom because I can transfer documents. I can do certain things that I couldn't do in other forms of conversation. So I had to sit and sort of think about it. And that's why I wanted to cue you up there because I think first blush, everybody sort of puts their, chews their nails a little bit until they really think it out. So, yeah, we are going to climb into that a little bit. So let's get at it. I want to hear some of the technology that you think will support digital sales.
Sure.
Because I'm a sales guy, write about sales. We got a lot of salespeople listening. So what technology can you queue up for us right now, or at least walk us through?
Yeah, so let me give you my 30-second philosophy on this. So, everyone's seen the stats that 72% of the sales process happens before they even, before a prospect talks to you, and that sort of, that most of the selling is done before. It's either recognition and talking to someone about a technology or doing research on the company. I think that, when we talk about technology, I think that sales has two roles today. I'll call one of them a digital detective. I like things that rhyme, so that will come across quite a lot today. But you have to have the same level of diligence that a company does to evaluate your company or solution. And so you either need a person to do that, or you need technology to do all of that research ahead of time. So you need to know company, all the key players, are they in the news? Are there social communities that they participate in? And so there's a whole host of tools, Gong, Drift, SalesLoft, Outreach for those pieces. But I think the first bits of technology is how do you be a digital detective and understand where people communicate and where they are and all the key players, just like those companies are researching you. So that's sort of the first part of it.
Yeah. And I think we have to shape the shot a little bit. So I appreciate the fact that I can't go, well, pick one. Tell me what you're selling. I sold for New York Life, an intangible. I sold for Xerox, there were certain things that crossed over, but we didn't market it
Yeah.
the same way, et cetera. So we do have to shape the shot. You haven't lost me on that one. But can you go back on that 72% number? Because you threw that out there. And I
Mhm.
tell you, I keep an eye on things like that. And I've not heard that number before. So what's, and I think I know where you're coming from, marketing, et cetera,
Well, they say
PR.
that,
Hmm.
yeah, sorry, Rob. There's lots of stats. I think this one's from either Forrester or Gartner. And so they're tracking how much of the sales process happens online prior to talking to a sales rep. So it's what research is done online, what social validation happens, which means who's calling a friend before making a purchase decision, or looking at who's using a software and technology. And so that stat keeps on creeping up. I think 2 years ago it was 67%. I think the latest number is around 72%, which means that as a salesperson, you're not selling your technology anymore. The customer already knows it, has already dwindled it down to the two or three options that they're potentially considering before they get on the phone or reach out to that company for a sales call, a demo, whatever that next step is in the process. So that's what that stat is. I don't know the exact stat now. I remember 72% in the last article, but it's been creeping up from the mid to upper 80s to 70% or higher, depending on what source you look at.
Yeah. And, on I've got two sides of this. On the one side, I can see it and I can hear it. And I'll tell you what I compare it to. I know that, people will, when they're in job transition, for instance,
Mhm.
they're working their tails off on resumes and elevator pitches and cover letters when well over 80% of the jobs are actually going uh, to network connections. In other words, to that
Mhm.
research that the company's doing already or that you can do. So we're sort of looking in the wrong pocket there. But the part that I want to throw at you, and this is where it's really interesting. We got the clash of two worlds here. We
Yeah.
got you much more technical than me. We got me kind of a grunt grinder sales guy. And so I follow decision cycles. And you're right. There's a lot of people will who are considering a solution will start talking to their friends and looking at different things.
Yeah.
But for the sales world, Christopher, a lot of us, we think our best prospects are ones that actually have done no, and let me get the whole sentence out because I'm hearing in my
Yeah.
head, this is going to sound bad. When I
Yeah.
say they haven't done research, I mean they have a problem they don't think is even worthwhile looking at alternatives to. And so
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
earlier in the game. And quite frankly, for salespeople, at least the ones I'm working with, those are the ones we want. Those are the
Yeah.
ones that we can really get in and consult with. And so I think that might shift the numbers or not. What do you think?
Well, it's kind of I think for me, the sales role is different now.
Mhm.
So you have your digital detective, and that can either be the salesperson, or that can be someone in marketing operations, or that can be a combination of that and some tool, right? So LinkedIn, tell me the company, as a salesperson, you know who all the key players are, who needs to be brought in to make a final decision. And so all that research can be done. Have they posted a press release? Do they have a podcast? Have they built out a community? Like all of that research can be done so that you're prepared for that conversation. But my proposition now is that a salesperson should be a creator. So think about, Mr. Beast, and I have a 10-year-old son, and I'm watching well too much Minecraft videos, and I've hidden under the stairs, can you find me type stuff.
Yeah.
But um, the role now is to sort of produce this interesting content so you can be a creator, a thought leader, so that when someone is in a position to make a decision to buy, they've done all the research on your organization and solution. They vetted you, you vetted them, right? You looked at either it's someone who's reached out to you, or an ideal customer fit or ideal customer profile, and you've done all that research. Now you have to sort of meet somewhere in the middle. So my my hypothesis here now is that the way that you're successful at sales is that you create this interesting content or become an influencer or someone with a loud voice in that space. And then they will find you once they're in a position to either buy or they're researching on what alternative to select between different vendors. I want to work with that person. I've seen them. They're on the communities where I am. So they must be incredible, right? Look at the
Yeah.
followers they have. And I want to work with that person because then I can tell my boss or organization that, go watch this video that this person has done, and that's why we want to choose this company over another. So I
Okay.
think it's digital detectives, and I think it's creators, and that sales is becoming a creator role now in terms of where that shift is going or where that thought process is.
Okay. And by the way, I interview a lot of authors. I think I have the title of your book. Digital detective has got to be up there somewhere. It's a really interesting term. It immediately lands in my brain, and I can see what you're saying through two words in a sense, and that's powerful. That's what you want when you communicate. So in case you haven't, I noticed you got a trademark on no lead left behind or a trademark
Yeah.
pending.
I may
Uh,
I may try to I better call my attorney today. I have not trademarked digital detective or done
yeah,
that research, but if
we're
it's
about two folks. When you hear this, this was 2 weeks ago. You may already have a TM on it, so slow down. Slow down. Belongs to Christopher. I'm going to move off this, but it's
yeah,
really interesting. I could almost see you and I functioning together in an office because you're digital, and it's not that I'm ignoring it. It's that
yeah,
for me, I actually give out keychains that say no order taking. It's not
yeah,
that I turn away a customer who says, "Can you help me?" It's
yeah,
that, yeah, of course I can. And the other 15 vendors you've called, my job is to get in early to create trust enough where people will tell me about things that are working and aren't working, and to sift through that and see if urgency is needed. Do we have to wait for it to really break down, or can we have a conversation about it? So you can see that a lot of times when I'm working with clients, uh, they're not necessarily seeking out my services,
yeah,
but with a good introduction, it'll be worthwhile to have a 15-minute conversation with me. And a lot of times they don't need my services because they don't need my services. But other times they're sitting on problems that are small. And that's where, to me, that's where my
yeah.
skill set lies. But it's just interesting because we're on two sides of this
Yeah,
thing.
I'm like Sherlock Holmes, right? So
Yeah.
I'm like, or Watson, and sort of I'm collecting all the different pieces, and
Yeah.
then based on experience selling to that group, you still need a human to coalesce all those pieces based on experience and
Yeah.
you know do what humans do better. I hopefully forever than some of these tools, which is read body language and have compelling conversations and understand need or things that someone is not telling you that
Right.
are sort of subtext of that and choose you because they like working with you opposed to just trying to evaluate two different options based on a price. So
Yeah.
it's a whole new, I don't know, it's quite fun experimenting with these pieces, but it is a whole new dynamic. I think the other thing is, you only have one chance to make a first impression. I'm sure everyone has heard that. It's even more so with digital selling. You get on that first Zoom call, you've evaluated them, they've evaluated you. Now you're having a call to make sure there's a match. And so you have less opportunity to mess up on that call because they're already three-quarters of the way down the process. It's not like you're having coffee or lunch or, if you say something that you notice the person didn't really respond well to, you can kind of back off a bit or change direction. You have to get it right as well. And so that's the other scary part about this is sort of you may only have that 15 to 20-minute chance of making that first impression on that call.
Right. And if I'm not a good digital detective and I don't have all my eggs in a row there, I could blow that opportunity. I'm getting it now. It's almost like a Reese's cup. I'm the peanut butter and you're the chocolate. Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
We got to function together because Christopher, I'm sort of representing, and I don't like this word. I'm going to rename it about 2 seconds, but I'm sort of representing the soft skills side of the conversation, which, by the way, I
mhm,
refer to as performance skills.
yeah.
And you're representing sort of the technical side, the digital side. How could I really be effective without your assistance? How can you be effective without my assistance? You know what I mean?
Right, yeah,
Those two skill sets. Yeah, I
exactly. And it's and they have to work particularly well together because you don't have the time to do all of the individual research that's needed, right? There's no, and again, depending on company size and how many deals you need to close to meet your revenue targets and those pieces, and then the number of touch points that you have to get in front of someone before they'll engage you, you know, you're sort of, if you're not thinking about the digital aspect of it first, you've sort of lost the game already and not had your at bats for that personalized conversation. You sort of like, I don't want to talk to that person, or I don't see them anywhere online. I don't see the company, um, how could they possibly be good?
yeah, and
Right.
I'm
And
flipping it,
that's
Christopher.
yeah.
I'm flipping it also from the customer's perspective of if we show up and we don't do, and we should be digital detectives as a sales force. If I go in and don't know what the client does, or
Mhm.
or say something that really exposes the fact that I've done very little research on the company, uh, we're back where we started from in a sense of I'm almost insulting this client. I would think, particularly in a more technical environment.
Oh,
So
I messed up. So I have like a story unfortunately, a fairly recent story to tell. So I was on a call that our VP of growth, Mike, brought me into and said, "Hey, Christopher, I'd like you to join this call." And so, I saw the initial invite of who was on the call, and a lot of the individuals were, marketing operations and some of those pieces, but I didn't do the research on all the key players. So we have this guy, and I'm not going to say his name because if I said it, you'd be able to figure out the company and such. But he starts talking and reviewing sort of plans and goals. I didn't realize that that was the CEO and founder of the company. And so, I'm interacting at sort of a different level. And I was like, okay, great, this is fine. Send us a proposal. And I'm like, who is this person? And so, yeah, it was okay because I don't think we let on that sort of happened in that call, but I was particularly embarrassed that I didn't know who this person was because I just looked at who was scheduled to attend the meeting, not figured out all the key players.
yeah. Yeah. So one of the morals of the story is know who you're talking to. Uh, you know, real fast, but it made me think I'm 32, 33 years ago, and I can mention this person's name. He's no longer with us, just salt of the earth human being. A company at the time named Van Camp and Merritt Mutual Fund Company. I'm setting up for a seminar. Christopher, I have no idea who's who. This
Yeah.
guy comes up, he's wearing jeans and a t-shirt pretty much. Turns out it's Jack Merritt and wants to know if he could help me pass out the
Yeah.
handouts. And
Yeah.
room's empty. I'm like, sure. I thought he was working for the hotel. But
Yeah.
I think the rule of thumb was, be polite to everybody. I was very
Exactly.
polite,
Yeah.
thank goodness. I'm not sure why I wouldn't be, but it's how I met Jack Merritt. And
Yeah.
one of the things I always remembered about him was just how down to earth he was. But to your point, I had no idea. And I really should have, although we didn't really have an internet rolling around over 30
Yeah.
years ago. We had information that was rolling around. But I
Yeah.
survived that as did you.
But it's funny, but that's the expectation for all of these pieces that
Yeah.
you know them and what's going on and like the context of organization. I mean, yeah, but at least look at the company's website, press releases, go on LinkedIn and see like who's in the company and what are different roles or Yeah, there's some basic things you can do without tools, but yeah, you don't want to be embarrassed because if your competitor, it's sort of like this is a very strong word, disrespect. It's almost as if it's a lack of respect for that organization if you didn't spend as much time learning about them as they did about you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I happen to have mutual friends of this person too. It was even worse. So thank goodness they didn't ask about someone we both knew.
Yeah. And from my perspective, thank goodness Jack Merritt was such a wonderful man, because if it had been somebody with a little bit more of an ego, et cetera, might have been
No,
somewhat annoyed like that, I was really dismissed. Now I'm kind of
no,
dismissing him a little bit. All right, let's do something together.
sure.
Let's draw a line. Okay.
No,
And what I want and what I'm looking to do is I want you to think um, we'll put a digital sales process on one side and maybe a
okay,
face-to-face process on the other. Okay. Because
okay,
in a
sure.
sense, we've been doing it for a couple minutes because I keep yanking around your back and going, when I do it, because I'm sort of representing the face-to-face world, but you do it for me. You're my guest.
Sure. Yes, I think face-to-face world. So I would say that, I mean, that was my life 4 or 5 years ago before I had a sales organization and all those pieces. But I would go to every event. So I'm going to call that an explorer. So I was an explorer. And so what I did is I found events that were going on that I thought there were interesting people, or they would have problems that we could solve, or they were types of companies we wanted to do business with. Yeah, so I'm in the DC metro area, so things like Northern Virginia Tech Council, and there's all manner of meetups. And so in person, it was all about finding the right audience and people that you could relate to. And so in person, it was more relying on, could you find something personally that you could have in common? Fishing, sailing, whatever that is, as a conversation starter, or early in my career, sort of name dropper. Like, did you know this person, or have you interacted with that? And so if I look on the in-person side, it was exploring and finding those events and places where I could meet people that met a certain criteria or a certain profile. And I had immediate conversations, and the rate of close or velocity of pipeline was rather quick. It could be as quick as 2 weeks and maybe as long as 3 weeks from the time that I was talking to the C-level person at a company about a problem. They'd introduce me to the team, and then, voila, 2 to 3 weeks later, there'd be a purchase event. I think what's happening now, even in person events and the ones that I've gone to, is that process is extended because there's a much larger buying team. So you have a conversation, they introduce you to an individual on the team, and then they want to introduce you to everyone else: sales, service, marketing, finance, and make sure that everyone is bought in. And then you get introduced to legal, and you go through that process of signing a contract from in person. So I think if you compare that to digitally, you can find all of those key stakeholders at the beginning of the process so that you bring them in when you're evaluating it, rather than extending it at the end of the process. So when I say I think the velocity of pipeline is about the same or similar, it depends on how good you do in person and identifying all the key stakeholders and getting introduced from that first meeting, opposed to being brought in at the end. And then digitally has that same pitfall, right? So if you're selling digitally, you don't do that research, you're in contact with someone at the company that you don't know, eventually you're going to be drug into a digital meeting with everyone and their mother, uncle, sister, and have to sort of resell that entire group and essentially start your process again.
Hmm.
So it's interesting. In person, you still do the research, so you can
Yeah.
see who is registered for an event, is who is going, but then that requires you to go on LinkedIn, research them, understand if you have anyone in common, see if they posted anywhere, and do that same level of work, even if you're going to meet them in person.
Right. So, Christopher, are we sort of back
Yeah.
to digital detective work again? I mean, doing that front end work to almost establish credibility in the conversation we're about to have, or am I?
Yeah, yeah,
Is there
you
more?
do, but it in person, what's interesting about that is you can still pick up the phone and get that, and you don't have to be as good of a digital detective,
Hmm.
right? So there's if you're going to an event, you can call the event organizer and say, "Hey, I'm attending, and do you know who's coming?" And let's talk about that. Or I saw that Bill from X company is there. Can you tell me a bit about him? And so you can do more of the um, building relationships, sort of the personal skills in that in these in-person events, but
Yes.
there's still a matter of doing some of that research.
Yeah.
And you don't go to those events to sell anymore. You go to meet people, you go to help, you go to build relationships so that they understand how you help. It's not like what I did earlier, which is I had a checklist of I want to meet these 5 people because opportunistically I think I can help them. The events are more about being a creator.
Yeah.
What is your point of view? How can you help? What are things you can work at? How many people can you communicate to gain awareness of what you're doing? It's a different, in person is different. In person selling is different now than it was, was even 2 years ago. You're going to be a personality. You're not going to be the salesperson and try to collect as many leads as you can.
Yeah. I work with a wide variety of clients, so I think we'd have to cherry pick it a little bit to
Yeah, yeah.
defend that. I hear what you're saying. I mean, I have one company, and we won't mention their name. They do a lot of cold calling, not
Mhm.
anymore, because they're they're cold calling to commercial establishments. Every one out of every four doors has actually got somebody behind it at this point, it seems.
Yeah,
So they've had to reestablish, they've had to sort of change the way they're doing it. I hear what you're saying. I will tell you that the part that I'm going to push back a little bit on is
sure. Yeah,
when we're there, it's just terminology. Remember,
yeah,
sales training guy, so I gotta stay put here on a few things. When you said they're not there to sell, I think what I would amend that to is we're not there to close, we're not there
yeah, that's
do
fair.
product dump. We're there to create trust. We're there to, yeah, but that's part of the selling process. I think what most people think of when I say sign right there on the line that is dotted, that's the
Yeah,
sale. Um, Establishing the relationship is all part of that
yeah.
cycle that goes into it.
You still have to do that. Like
Yeah.
you can't skip those steps. You can't sort of have a robot send an automated AI generated email to someone who is a prospect based on a set of terms. I'm sure you've gotten those emails just like
Get
me.
them every day.
Hey, Christopher, you have a very successful business. I think you could benefit from this
Yep.
as title in LinkedIn, paste
Right.
here, right?
Yep.
You
I get them
still
for the
have to,
podcast all the time, but I get at least one a day. And it'll always sort of drop in a reference to something obscure from the podcast that whatever AI or whatever program they're using. And
yeah,
it particularly annoys me. I'm even looking at the guest going, I wouldn't mind booking that guest, but I'm annoyed with this email out and Z. Out it goes. So yeah, and that's the part, and we'll leave this now, but that's the part where I'm always wondering if we are going to digitally sell, okay,
yeah.
then and I would think that when I'm there, I'm putting my best foot forward, I'm dressed properly,
Mhm.
I'm showing up properly. But as I was preparing for your podcast, where I was thinking about this particular question, and I was going to draw the line there, I went, well, come on. if we have a good mic, if we have a good background, if we dress properly, if we're lit up
Yeah,
properly, there's still a level of attentiveness that makes a difference, whether I'm in front of you or
yeah,
not. I can still make a statement that I've got my ducks in a row and I'm a quality human being and representing a wonderful company and product, whether I'm
yeah.
physically there or not. I actually, Christopher, can't defend my argument that I wanted to make, which is, yeah, can't get the mind share of a human being digitally, on screen. I think you can. As a trainer, I'm going to stay put and say, I don't know if I can change
No,
the culture of the organization, but I think I can create trust and get a conversation going.
but I've read this sort of this neuroscience article that talks about. So I like to think I'm a scientist by training, probably not, but um, that the way that your brain interacts with seeing video instead of a real life human is very different. And so there's sensors that are not activated in those pieces. So it is very different. I like to think of digital selling as getting to a relationship much more quickly.
Mm.
So what if you could filter out all those other things? Like I'll pick something absurd, like let's say I like the color green and you like the color blue. And all right, I want to find more people that are passionate about the color green to hang out with. And so you've identified yourself as a color blue. And so maybe we're not going to have as good a conversation because we don't share that interest. So I like to think of digital selling as getting to the relationship sooner.
Yeah.
I've researched the company, you've researched the solution and the person. It's like, yep, it makes sense for us to talk because there's enough of a connection there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I'm hoping it's that, but ironically, so I will fall on my sword here. We probably would have never connected had it not been for a person, John Gilroy,
Right.
right? We may have, passed ships in the middle of the night,
Yeah.
but
We were in two different
so all,
camps.
all, all of that being said, right?
Yeah.
All of sort of, digital first and social selling, we wouldn't have this conversation if a human didn't say, "Oh, wait a second, I think you guys should talk."
Yeah. That's true. That's true. That's
So,
how it
so
happened.
now I'm on my back foot because, this had nothing to do with digital or research or being in similar communities or having lots of joint friends on LinkedIn,
That's
right? It
true.
was a person.
That's true. However, I did a little, I didn't know the word. I did a little detective work on you, and you probably did a little detective work on me. So there, we're back on solid ground again. And I do think that I'm going to use one of my terms. It's not a real technical term way, but when there's prospects and there's qualified prospects, and
Mhm.
many times salespeople are wasting their time with prospects that would never really become a customer. So we qualify a prospect. Is there a
Yeah.
need? Do we have a chance of getting the order? Is it worth my time? And there, Christopher, again, I think your side is powerful because it saves us a lot of time of prospecting in ridiculous places. So I'd rather do that homework than fly to Dallas and learn it while I'm sitting with a customer.
Yeah, it's sort of but the other thing that I would say is that some people just look at the data and judge all of it by that. You have to experiment on the periphery as well. Like
Yeah.
what I'm scared about with this technology is someone's just going to take a list. Like, okay, our ideal customer profile is a B2B SaaS company that has X million dollars in revenue and so many employees, but they may neglect things that are on outliers of that and discount them out of hand. So that's the other part of it is that you still need someone to think about those other pieces,
Yeah.
right? And so, if you're just starting out and are trying to build the skills to build the relationships and have these conversations, then it's a great place to start. But what if you're not closing as many deals and that what seems to be the ideal customer fit? Maybe you experiment with something else like a smaller company, one that's just gotten venture funding, like someone who, they just have a new CEO and they might be a little bit of a larger company than what you typically sell to. And that's where the human element or our ability to be curious and test sort of comes into play beyond just these use of tools.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because this is like I don't want to ever be in a position where I'm not having conversations like this, and I wake up in the morning and Christopher, here's a list of things you need to do from the time you brush your teeth to the time I sort of lay my head on the pillow at night. But it's still that balance, even with the detective work you're doing on both sides. You still have to think about what is unique about that relationship, that person, and makes me a human, because I want to work with another human. I don't want to interact with a bot and fill out a form to do something. At least most of the people in my generation are still that way.
Yeah.
I just don't want to talk to Alexa or Siri all day. That doesn't sound like fun.
Right. Now they're actually a lot of advertising now, basically harpooning auto attendants and the lack of communicate,
Yeah.
a human being. All right. Can I take an existing person that's within my company and kind of move them into a more of a digital sales role, uh, and train them? Or do I have to bring another human being in and basically create a position for them?
Oh, that's a hard one. I would say
Hard for me to
that,
ask.
yeah, I mean, no, I think you have two options.
Okay.
You have a digital detective or you've got an operations person, and they do that work. They
Hmm.
find the list, they do the research, they work with the account executive or strategic account manager, and provide all that information. They confer with one another and say, yep, this is value for me for that relationship. And then you could also have a great, um, I'm going to interview you for an hour and take snippets that I can post and help you build out a social following and community and be a thought leader. So you can kind of work around that role, or um, you have to find someone who is digital first or is willing to be trained on how to do those things. Like, you know, getting comfortable with sending video snippets is not an easy thing to do.
Right.
I can't tell you how I've taken 7, 10 takes and I'm still not happy with it. I'm like, oh, I give up. I'm gonna, try again tomorrow. So it's either you have to put roles around that individual, or they have to have a propensity to learn or be curious to be able to, be an influencer. You don't have to be, millions of followers, but you have to be that person that's known for that thing.
Right.
And we probably know dozens of people like that,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And so that's the piece. So either put individuals around it, or if they don't have the propensity to be able to do that role, you have to have a whole new outlook on what that role and description is.
Right. And I think we're going to see that popping up more and more in companies if we aren't already
Yeah.
of getting somebody in there. We have internal wholesalers and external wholesalers. We have all sorts of support for
Mhm.
our sales force. I think now what I'm hearing you say, like and like I said, we're probably already working our way down this road. But
Yeah.
thanks for bringing it onto my show. Is that this is going to be part of that department? Whether we train people from within or whether we bring somebody from on the outside, this is going to be of value. And you spelled it out beautifully. It's going to really just sharpen our tools a little bit, save us time. I mean, one of the questions I was going to ask you, and I decided why, because I'm pretty sure I know the answer is how will this affect, the amount of time that it takes to
Yeah.
go from greet, meet to close. And the more digital detective work we do, the faster we're going to be, the more nimble we're going to be. So there's a whiff, and we call that's a what's in it for me. There's a whiff
I'm I'm
for
um, I'm
people.
not as young as I look.
Okay.
But no, I mean it's yeah, a lot of these tools are designed to try to make you spend your time on the things that you like to do or the things that are more effective. Like,
Yeah.
all else being equal, I'd rather have a conversation than spend X amount of time looking and seeing what channel someone's a part of or those pieces. I want to get to this.
Yeah.
And so can I get to this faster? And I think that's the perspective we have, is how do you get to a relationship faster?
Yeah.
And then the right type of relationship. If someone wants to buy bird feeders, I probably can't help them, right? But if they want to talk about infrastructure or those things, yep, awesome. Let's chat. Whether I can help you or not, at least we can learn from one another.
Yeah. And you spelled that out really well. I mean, there they are. Make sure we're talking to the right person, saving ourselves some time, keeping ourselves from looking foolish, basically, with data and information. And maybe go back on this podcast about 10 minutes and play the part about where we were both talking about how when we can see it a mile away when it's done in a very amateurish way of name, drop in a phrase, see, I know you. That's just not working anymore. So we're going to have to be better detectives than that. Christopher, I want to tell you, I really enjoyed it, and I really been sitting here on my side, the face-to-face side, sort of, and loving the way you were able to sort of draw both sides together. So for the salespeople who are listening here, these are don't turn your back and say, hey, we used a pad of paper and we liked it. Use your pad of paper and pen, do all the things you said, but we're trying to figure out ways to save you time, improve your effectiveness, improve your close ratio, and make sure you're chasing the right prospects too. And we're just nipping at it. And we can come up with 5 more benefits if you like. This is the wave of the future. And I'm grateful to have had you on the show so you could share it with us. Thank you, Christopher.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I want to eventually meet you in real life, so hopefully that will happen sometime in the near future.
Well, we're Washingtonians, and I almost forgot. How do people get a hold of you?
So, yeah, I'm surprised I'm getting stumbled on that question. See,
Mr. Digital Detective.
I'm not used to being asked. I think looking me up on LinkedIn, Christopher Antonopoulos, or that's probably the easiest way to get me, or Christopher@measuredresults.com via email. That's sort of I've got you past my EA filter. So, look me up on LinkedIn, send me a quick email. Love to talk about this stuff with anyone who's interested. So, yeah, just reach out to me via any of those channels.
Beautiful. I'll have that link up on our site. And for those of you who Antonopoulos doesn't exactly roll off the tongue, trust me, I practiced it. It's Antonopoulos. Actually, it does spell the way it sounds. So Christopher Antonopoulos, that's where you'll find him on LinkedIn. Look him up. And again, thank you so much for being on the show.
Great. Thanks.
We'll do it again as well as we can, everybody, next time. Until then, stay safe.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please rate and recommend it on iTunes, Outcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get more information on this show and Rob at jollis.com.